Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. We're in Downing Street, where tonight it seems that 5 days after polling day, Britain may finally be about to get a new government. It's becoming increasingly clear that the Labour Party has given up hope of doing a deal with the Liberal Democrats. Nick Clegg, the Liberal Democrat leader, has had another face-to-face meeting with David Cameron, and his team are thought to be finalising an agreement with the Conservatives. First tonight, our deputy political editor, James Landale, on the parties, the leaders and the negotiations that could be about to see a new man in number 10.
Nick Clegg is fast running out of road. For days he's kept his options open, but now he must make his choice. A choice that'll determine the fate of his party, but more importantly, the future of our government.
The discussions between the political parties have now reached a critical and final phase. I'm as impatient as anybody else to get on with this, to resolve matters one way or another. My parliamentary party was up into the small hours yet again discussing things. We will act as ever responsibly.
But will that mean making this man Prime Minister? David Cameron's biding his time, making clear to the Lib Dems that he's made his final offer.
My own members of Parliament have shown that they're prepared to put aside party interest in the national interest by agreeing to a referendum on alternative vote. So it is now, I believe, decision time for the Liberal Democrats, and I hope they make the right decision that will give this country the strong, stable government that it badly needs.
But the current government wanted their say first. Labour's negotiators, headed by Lord Mandelson, spent 3 hours this morning with the Lib Dems to try to forge a deal between their parties. And afterwards, one of their team said the talks have been positive.
There are many points of agreement. There are obviously further issues to be worked through, and I hope those talks will continue. But I thought there was a good atmosphere and a good constructive basis for our discussion.
But as the day wore on, Labour MPs began to voice in public what many ministers felt in private, that a Lib-Lab deal was unworkable.
I'm very reluctant to see a Labour-Lib deal. I would prefer to see a Tory, Conservative and Lib Dem deal.
I want to see what's best, not only for the country, but also for the long-term prospects of the Labour Party. And I'm not convinced that a shaky, dodgy coalition with our opponents, in this case the Liberal Democrats, would be in the long-term interests of the Labour Party.
We need decisions now!
As the country faced a fifth day of uncertainty, public impatience and anger began to show as people gathered on the lawns outside Parliament.
As a Labour voter, I want Parliament to sit and I want the discussions to go on in open.
Parliament will sit and Parliament will vote, and it's all about whether you've got a majority.
Deals.
Meanwhile, David Cameron was in the Commons to meet his MPs and reassure some who fear he's given the Lib Dems too much on voting reform. Well, up the road this afternoon, his negotiating team began talking to the Lib Dems once again.
As you know, we believe very strongly that there should be a government with a strong and secure majority in the House of Commons, and of course with an elected Prime Minister. We remain very, very firmly of that view. We set out our proposals to achieve that yesterday, and we have come here to hear the Liberal Democrat response.
The Prime Minister returned to Downing Street from the Commons, perhaps for the last time. Ministers then joined him, and there were few smiles. This evening, a close ally of Mr Brown appeared ready to concede defeat, accepting that the talks between Labour and the Lib Dems were over, and that Mr Brown may be preparing to leave Downing Street. So all eyes still on the talks between the Lib Dem and Conservative negotiators in Whitehall. The ball is still in the Lib Dems' court. Their MPs, lords and party managers will be meeting here shortly, and they've a big choice. Do they go into coalition with the Conservatives, or do they let the Tories go it alone? James Landale, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, with me now is the BBC's political editor, Nick Robinson. Nick, every time I check, there seems to be a new twist or turn in this story. What do you make of it all?
Well, the Prime Minister is now preparing to resign, I'm told. He is preparing to go to the palace. He's inside Downing Street now with his wife, Sarah. He is with some of his closest allies and aides of recent times, with Peter Mandelson, with Ed Balls, with Ed Miliband, Douglas Alexander, Sue Nye, who people may remember from that conversation in the back of the car he referred to, with Alistair Campbell, who once worked closely with Tony Blair. I'm told in the last few minutes he's spoken to Tony Blair. It is a moment, of course, not just when he will leave Downing Street, but when New Labour will leave Downing Street and will leave power. The end, if it comes, of an extraordinary era in British politics, and the birth of a new one. If and when he leaves Downing Street, we will then see a sequence of events in which David Cameron will be called to the palace to see Her Majesty the Queen be asked to form a new government.
As you've hinted there, if a deal goes through, this is a huge moment. It changes the face of British politics, doesn't it?
It does, not just because we're seeing a transition that we've not seen for 3 decades, George. It is 3 decades since a Conservative walked into Downing Street ejecting a Labour government. Margaret Thatcher, of course, that was in 1979. It is 7 decades since we saw a coalition government. 70 years, too, since we saw a Liberal around the seat, around the cabinet table. These are dramatic changes in British politics. We'll reshape it all. There may be some Liberal Democrats tonight who are asked to sign this off who simply can't stomach it and would rather join another party or resign or go independent. We will see big changes in the next few months to come, not just in the faces, not just in the policies, but the sort of politics that we've had for many years.
All right, Nick, for the moment, thank you very much. I want to take you round the corner now to the